So welcome back, everybody. We're now going to move to our fourth panel, which is on a subject which for all of us really is a novelty. So we're looking now at vertiports and urban air mobility. And to lead this panel, we have from EASA our drones program manager, Maria Algar-Ruiz. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Take please your seat and fasten your seat belts. Now we take off vertically. We don't take off horizontally. So vertiports, the future of air mobility. So the key ground infrastructure that will enable urban air mobility. So we're coming from the Cinderella of the ground handling of the airport family. So we go now to the new kid on the box. In order to discuss the topic of vertiport, I would like immediately to call, without losing time, my distinguished panelists. So we have Joaquin Lukin, who is the head of the aviation safety unit of the European Commission, DG Move. Please take your seat. Thank you. Solène Lebris, Advanced Air Mobility Project Lead from the group Aéroports de Paris. Please take your seat. Thank you. Romain Erning, who is the head of mobility for Choose Paris region. Thank you. Take your seat. Bradley Miller, Managing Director of UK and the Europe, Middle East and Africa region of Ferrovial. Thank you. And the last but not the least, Jan Jagger, Head of Aerospace and Vertiports in Volocopter. Please take your seat. Applause. Thank you. So thanks to Pedra, Julia, and the airport department of EASA, we have been able in EASA to publish the first prototype technical specifications for vertiport design. It has been the first product of this type in the world. So we are very proud of this achievement. And we did that in March this year on time for the Amsterdam Drone Week and the EASA high-level conference on drones. This prototype technical specification is key because it enables the design of the vertiports, this new kit on the block of the airport family. Is based on heliports, but it has a lot of innovative features, and is enabled basically what we are aiming to provide to the citizens, the new mode of transportation in an urban environment, urban air mobility. So urban air mobility aims to facilitate a safe, fast, efficient, and sustainable mobility means a third dimension in a city environment, within the city, from the airport to the city, intra-city, and what the panel will be discussing is basically the integration of the infrastructure in the airport environment, in the city, and the innovative solutions that we need to find to integrate this new infrastructure in an already very busy landscape. So I will be addressing the first question to Joaquin. Joaquin, the Commission published issue 2 days ago. They already very much waited Drone Strategy 2.0. So we have been waiting for it already since some time. So it's the next step for Europe after the 2015 drone strategy. So it has been needed to amend. A lot of things has happened between then. A lot of activity has taken place. But we needed to have a new vision and a new set of actions that will guide the European community until 2030. So Joaquin, in the drone strategy, vertiport is clearly mentioned. Is the enable infrastructure for development of basically the predecessor of the drones, so the manned VTOLs. So can you elaborate what is in the strategy that is very important for the vertiport developments, and what are the European Commission views on the vertiport development? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. So in the strategy, we articulate 10 action areas which we see as the building blocks for creating what we call the drone ecosystem of the future. And one of these action areas is built around the idea that we want to support the creation of innovative and urban air mobility. And for that to happen, of course, we not only need vehicles, but we also need vertiports as the sort of infrastructure side of innovative air mobility. And therefore, first of all, we welcome the first step that was taken by EASA already now in issuing the world's first prototype technical design specifications for vertiports. And we think this is a very good starting point on which to build. And in the strategy, we in particular announce a further regulatory action in our so-called flagship action 5. So there are 19 flagship actions in the drone strategy, and one is on vertiports, announcing that we intend to adopt, so the Commission intends to adopt rules for the design and operation of vertiports under the scope of the EASA basic regulation. So we will be working together with EASA on an amendment of the aerodrome regulation, Regulation 139 of 2014, laying down requirements and administrative procedures related to aerodromes. I mean, these rules need to be created, but sort of from a political perspective, the strategy takes the view that we are seeking to have infrastructures which are open access and which are not proprietary and which basically follow the same open model as airports and heliports today. And personally, I think this is very important for this industry because it is not very plausible that we will have a situation where we'll have in a given city tons of vertiports, each of one dedicated to one specific operator. So we'll need to create an infrastructure which can be used by all the operators that are active in this field in order to have that shared, in particular when it comes to both the airport access as well as the access or the location of these vertiports in the city. Another aspect that is mentioned in the strategy is the security dimension of vertiports. On the one hand, we have the aviation security framework, which is set out in Commission Regulation 300, but there is also Commission Regulation 1054 of 2009, which allows member states to adopt alternative security measures, and vertiports may be an instance which requires such alternative measures, and the Commission intends to develop the appropriate strategic framework in order to enable this development. And finally, you will find that vertiports play an important role in the strategy in this overall chapter, Chapter 4, on ensuring sustainability and societal acceptance. Because very clearly, this whole vertiport, or rather the whole UAM industry, including the vertiport infrastructure, will only take off if local communities, cities, regions can play a decisive role in its development, in determining where vertiports should be located, in ensuring that the needs of citizens and the need of intermodality is being taken account of when developing the whole outlay of vertiports, and therefore the Commission proposes that cities and regions should use a tool which already exists, which is the so-called Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, in order to ensure that this integration of vertiports into the intermodal pattern of traffic in any region and city is being taken care of. We also point to the need of citizens' participation, and therefore things such as regulatory sandboxes, living labs, allowing citizens to actually see what urban air mobility will be about, and that it can be provided in terms which is acceptable in relation to noise, security, safety, privacy, and so forth, is very important. To bring all this together, we have another flagship action 7, which says that the Commission will fund the creation of an online platform to support a sustainable IAM implementation by authorities, communities, municipalities, industry, and stakeholders. This practically will be done by EASA, the creation of the so-called IAM hub, which will be funded by the Commission with support from the European Parliament. And this will create an online platform that brings together the stakeholders, not only from aviation, but it should also support authorities, cities, and other stakeholders for the implementation of innovative air mobility in order to, again, ensure that public knowledge and public acceptance for this new mode of transport is being created.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. So you have indeed already highlighted a lot of very important points, societal acceptance. So we are closer to the citizens, so this is a very important point. So the incorporation and the challenge to incorporate vertiports in the general urban mobility plan, and the need to use some boxes. That brings me straight away to Solène. But before that, I would like to remind the delegates in the conference, please put your questions in Slido. So I forgot my mobile, so I will not be looking permanently, but I will ask the colleagues let's say, to bring oh, thank you very much. Bit improvisation here. So to bring also the questions, so I hope that we can have at least 15 minutes our panel is a bit shorter, 1 hour, and we have a lot to say, but I really would like to give 15 minutes that we can have an exchange between the delegates and the panelists in this very interesting topic. So, Solène, you work for an airport operator, so Aéroport de Paris, one of the biggest airports in Europe. And it has been announced the inauguration of the first European vertiport, actually, near Paris. So how you have dealt with the inauguration? Have you received feedback from the citizens? Have they been able to touch and see, to be there? What is the experience? What have you received as a feedback from the people visiting this, the first vertiport in Europe?
Maybe I can show the first slide for that. Thank you very much. So yeah, so we had the inauguration on the 10th of November, and it was the inauguration of the first fully integrated vertiport in Europe. The idea behind that is that it actually brings together the landing and takeoff area, the passenger terminal, so you can actually see in the background here, co-constructed by Group ADP and Skyports. And it actually brings together also the control area and the maintenance hangar. So that inauguration was co-created with Volocopter, here present as well, and Skyports with the support of Group RATP, Choose Paris region, that is here as well. So it was all created together, and obviously with the support of the French Civil Aviation Authority, so the DGAC. We all made that happen, and it was the first European vertiport fully integrated, which means with all the different sort of like part of the value chain of the ecosystem of advanced air mobility. And also, and one thing that was quite impressive as well, it was the first time that we had a piloted eVTOL with Volocopter among other aircraft. So we already had flights with Volocopter in Pontoise earlier this year, and piloted as well. So we had the first piloted eVTOL flight in France. But this time, what was really impressive is that we had that eVTOL flight with other aircraft in the aerodrome. So the aerodrome was open, and we had another aircraft flying in the same volume, in the same airspace. What we're trying to demonstrate is that you can actually have that type of aircraft and that type of eVTOL with other aircraft. We obviously had the air traffic controllers who were controlling the entire sort of like flight operations, but we made that happen all together. So it was the first time that we could have that entire ecosystem completed, bringing together all the different components. And we had a very important media coverage, which for us is quite important for ADP, but also for Volocopter and for all the different partners. Had a very important media coverage internationally. On TV, as I was saying earlier, like on TV, in French TV, we've got 6 main channels, and we're broadcasted at the 8 o'clock news TV show in 4 of them. So there was a massive sort of like media in press, in the written press as well, in the radio. So there was a lot of media coverage that helped us, like, you know, sort of bring lights to what has been happening. let's take a little bit of step back because this is inauguration and it was 3 weeks ago, but that sandbox actually was created at the end of 2020. So it's not something that has just been happening here in the last few weeks. We've been working with our partners for years now, and that actually inauguration comes also at the end of a year of tests that have been happening in the sandbox. It's just that it's the first time that we've got everything together at the same place. So the guests that actually came to the inauguration, first they could see the flights, and they could actually see the VTOL flying with another aircraft. And they could also experience a full passenger journey in that building. So from the access to the vertiport through the control sort of like the control sort of areas with biometric equipments, and then they could actually go all the way to boarding the aircraft because we had the prototype that you can see fly, but we also had a volocopter mock-up on the ground so that you can actually, from arriving to that vertiport, going through the entire passenger journey through onboarding into the aircraft. So that was like a very important part. And it is a milestone for us because we've done a lot of work, as I was saying, since the end of 2020, bringing the partners all together in this site, in the experimental site in Pontoise. And we've done like a noise measurement campaign in March last year, and we've done a lot of tests in Pontoise for the integration, so the airspace integration of the eVTOL with other sort of other aircraft, but also in the integration of different type of aircraft together. Integration for the Chorus Experience project. So we're ending this year, and now it's a milestone for us because the opportunity in that inauguration is that we were projecting, simulating for the guests what could actually, how it could look like in 2024 for the Olympic Games when we're going to have the routes that we're developing right now. So it was like a simulation. What can you expect when you're going to arrive in 2024? You're going to want to take your eVTOL flight. This is something that's going to look like that. And now it's the start of our run towards the 2024 Olympic Games and everything that needs to be prepared between now and then. So that was also why this milestone was important for us.
Thank you very much, Solène. Indeed, Paris 2024, the first urban and mobility showcase in Europe. And we are all together running a marathon. So basically, Aéroports de Paris is the leading for the project, obviously, but Volocopter, EASA with the certification, the operational organizations approvals, the DGAC, the DSNA for the routes. Yeah. So it's a complex marathon, but we are working together. We are looking forward to see this done well, successfully, and safe. Yeah. Very good, thank you. Roman, so you have a long experience on urban planning, and now you need to, and also for the aerospace projects, but now you need to integrate in the difficult urban setup the vertiports. So as a first, so what are the main challenges that you see in general on the, so for transportation of goods of people in cities like Paris, and how do you see UAM, what it brings to this already complex environment, and how do you see UAM integrating in a mobility mix in the Paris region, already complex setup with?
Yeah, thank you for the complex question. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. So just a bit of background. I work for Choose Paris Region. This is the Economic and Innovation Development Agency for the Paris region, which is the city of Paris and 7 counties surrounding Paris, including the main airports, business district of La Défense, and other wonderful places. So I should recommend you to visit a fantastic region. I have one slide. I wanted to say a bit of background of what we are facing in the Paris region, like in many other metropolitan areas. We are facing air pollution due to thermal vehicles, but also congestion. And I wanted to mention in an era where the cheap and abundant energy is over, so it's very complex for local authorities, regional governments, and even from national governments to deal with this problem. So what what are the main responses from the local authorities and also regional authorities? There are three main topics I wanted to mention today. The first is we continue to invest in mass transit, mainly metro and buses in the Paris region. So we will double the size of the metro lines in Paris with a big project called Grand Paris Express, 200 kilometers of new metro line, 68 new train stations, and an investment of 30 billion euro. So first line will be ready for the Olympics, and also lines until 2030. So that's the first response. The second one is investing a lot in active mobility, which is walking and biking. And now we have in Paris and in the region a great momentum for biking, which is super important for us. And the last point is make our transportation carbon-free, especially buses, trucks, and even cars. At the end, we are fighting against single car ownership and to help people to choose another mobility option. So to come back to your question, what are the place of urban air mobility? We see, so we had discussion with several eVTOL manufacturers and a lot of people in the ecosystem, and we were quite impressed by their technological progress. And we see with the inauguration that Solène mentioned, you see that the work is going very well. And so that's the first point. And we decided to team up with ADP and Group ADP and RATP on this public-private partnership to explore all the opportunities that this third dimension new mobility could offer to citizens in Paris region. So a lot of work has been done, but we have a lot on our plate too. But what I can say is that we see on the transportation of goods a lot of use case for emergency and medical application. And this is something we wanted to work with Solène and all the team. And on this side of transportation of people, we see mainly on regional distances or to bring people to destination where we don't have too many mobility options, like we don't have a train station or we don't have any infrastructure that could be implemented. So that's for now, but I'm sure that the whole ecosystem will do some big breakdown or big milestone to open this window of opportunities. But in our mind, we have to say that we want to have urban air mobility as a safe, clean, multimodal, which is super important for us, affordable. We don't want to have rich people toy, and it's super important for us. And the last point is energy efficient, because we don't want to put a lot of energy in this eVTOL if we can put that in a train or in comparison. So, and you mentioned also public acceptance. And perhaps we'll have a time, but to discuss on that later on. But this is something we wanted to address on the public side. We see more traction from communities surrounding the airfield of Pontoise, where we have experimentation. And we want to spread the world into the region, because for many of us in the Paris region, this is still science fiction. So people need to see, need to touch, need to test in order to see what, if it's not a movie, it's not science fiction.
Thank you very much, Roman, for the insights on how things are developing and how you see the integration of the vertiports and urban air mobility. Societal acceptance has been very important to EASA, so we have actually a study. We conducted a study in 2000, so it's already, but I think it's still relevant. It's 1.5 years old, but it's still relevant, the results. So there is a huge societal acceptance, but we need to address the concerns. And all the topics you have mentioned so are actual concerns that were put forward, as well as the first use cases like more acceptable for medical and emergency, obviously. Bradley, So Ferrovial, so you have already a lot of experience on vertiport operators. You are even an NSP, so together with NAT Ferrovial. So your safety for you is high on the agenda. We understand, and now we need to bring urban and mobility vertiport, which is a new mode of transportation, which is very much related to convenience of people. So we need to bring those vertiport closer to them. How in Ferrovia are you managing those vertiport design, locations, and integration into transport networks, and how you ensure the balance between convenience to passengers and safety?
Very good question. Thank you very much. Thank you to EASA for the very kind invite. Delighted to be here. I think just before I answer the question, just picking up on your note about the societal acceptance survey that was done in 2021. Really important survey. We took a lot from it. I think one of the things that we were very pleased to see, that whilst there are issues to be addressed from a societal acceptance or a society desirability for urban air mobility, is that actually the respondents overwhelmingly said that they trust aviation regulation. And so we're delighted with the leadership role that EASA is taking, along with other stakeholders within the EU, to make sure that they're at the forefront, to make sure that regulation is keeping up with and trying to stay ahead of where the industry is actually going. It's hugely important. Roman's already mentioned other stakeholders that just think urban air mobility is still science fiction. Once you start to show them that actually that the technology is really advancing, this is coming very quickly, and much quickly than people think, one of their next questions is, what about the regulation? And they immediately start to think beyond their own remit. And so to be able to say that the likes of EASA are taking this very seriously and are thinking about this and releasing things like the MPA, where the public consultation closed in September, the drone strategy 2.0, is absolutely huge for us, because it means that we can talk to politicians and civic leaders, commercial landlords, about the fact that it's not just our ambition or our OEM partners' ambitions to bring urban air mobility to the populace. It is actually being taken seriously at an EU and a global level. In terms of integrating safely from a Ferrovial perspective, if you take nothing away from what I'm about to say, please, 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 safety is our number one priority. It's the thing that gives us permission to be at the table we feel. We think about that with all of our airport assets and our other infrastructure assets as well. From an urban air mobility perspective, layering on top of that, we think about the consumer and put the consumer at the heart of everything that we do. And so because of that, the location of our vertiports is based upon our forecast of consumer demand. So demand is critical to the success of the industry going forward. And so the integration of convenience, I see as a bit of a spectrum, in terms of the most highly convenient locations are, by implication, probably going to be the highest risk, because it suggests that we're going to be taking to people to where they want to go. And if that's urban air mobility, the clue being in the title, it is downtown. And so overflying large numbers of people, going into highly densely populated areas where people live and work. And so how do we do that? At the other end of the spectrum, the least risky is going to be not to overfly those people, but that then drives the least convenience. And so then for us, that then detracts from what urban air mobility and jumping on an eVTOL can actually bring. And so we go through a number of both passive and then active safety management systems, the passive ones being about where does the demand take us within an urban environment, what locations are most looking likely from a postcode or a zip code perspective. And then from there, we start to look at and assess 2 to 3 different sites by node across our vertiport network. And at that point, we trigger all of our in-depth due diligence in terms of airspace, energy availability, wildlife, environmental, connection to existing public transport and surface access, as well as the commercial aspects. Once we've selected a site, we then start to do our site-specific ConOps and our site-specific SMS to ensure that the vertiport can operate safely, sustainably, and agnostically as well, regardless of OEM.
Thank you very much, Bradley, for the guide us through the ferrovial insights and the way how vertiports will be developed, established, and locate and manage. So, Jörg, you are a beetle manufacturer. You will also operate the aircraft, but you are equally active in the development of Vertiport. You even developed your Vertiport design handbook. But you will not be a Vertiport operator or Vertiport design. So why is it that you are engaged so much in this Vertiport domain? And from Volocopter point of view, how will be a Vertiport look like? Where it will be? We have heard from the Commission very clear open access for everybody, ferrovial, OEM agnostic. How do you see that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And bringing Vertiports at all and that conference here and to the panel. I think we from Volocopter, I don't need to explain who Volocopter is. I guess most of you, if not all, are aware what we are doing. So we started already more than 11 years ago when founding the companies. We have meanwhile developed the fourth generation of the aircraft. So the things are not happening overnight and they are really at the doorstep. So I think this is happening. This is just a message, I think, that is very clearly, hopefully understood by everybody. It is coming very soon. And with that, as Volocopter, of course, we have to make sure that not only the aircraft is type certified, because the best aircraft will not fly if then the environment is not there. And that includes clearly airspace, and that includes specifically infrastructure to take off and land. And it was mentioned already here by Brett, I think urban air mobility, what we aim for is really one of the key challenges to put this new kind of traffic into the city centers. So for that reason, we have started already almost 4 years ago to look into it into more detail. What does it mean? And start from our perspective in order to see what we also can tell our partners. And I think that is important, and we can only stress it, that it is really a joint effort to see what is needed. And in terms of infrastructure, we have come up with some key findings that we would also would like to share here. And maybe some of you may remember as early as 2019, we actually as Volocopter built the first airport, if you like to say this way, as we now see Vertiports to be an aerodrome. And with that, in 2019, we showcased the first Vertiport in Singapore at that time. And from the learnings we have made over the years, we have developed a concept that you just mentioned. So we are actually in a position to share with our partners what it takes from an aircraft perspective in order to make a Vertiport meaningful. And from our perspective, and you can see it here on the screen behind me, I think there are a few topics. I don't want to detail them out in full length because we don't have the time for it. But I think whenever, and we have been in talks with a number of partners around the world, as you can believe, with cities specifically, but also airports. Airports are one of our main partners for a good reason, because the use case is very often to connect an airport with a center of interest. We do not compete with mass transport, so that's for sure. So just also get this very clear out of the way. We will not compete with any metro or other connection, but really this is something where's a demand. So clearly coming from the customer perspective and to see where's the convenience for the customer and to make it work. So talking and looking at a number of different concepts, I think what we would check first of all, is there anything already in the DNA of that concept that relates to current regulation and standards? We know there is not much around, and again, I can only appreciate and I think express my gratitude to EASA having the PTS and the work that has been done here by the colleagues, also having the pleasure to be part of the rulemaking task. I think an excellent approach that is also recognized around the world, so I can only tell you from our perspective that helps a lot to having that, and also, of course, what we can take from existing aerodrome and specifically heliport world, that we can make use of things that are there, and also existing infrastructure, specifically in the beginning, will be used by urban air mobility, also to reduce investments, to have a quick start, and for that reason, I think it's good to have existing infrastructure usable for our operations, but also to see what does it take in order to make it work for VTOL aircraft, and also if new infrastructure has to be created, that we can see quickly what are regulations and guidance materials that I think everybody's looking for. We really see the need and are requested by a number of competent authorities around the world looking for some guidance. And I think EASA here is really at the forefront, and of course others are following. One point I also always like to mention is not only looking to the ground, and it can look very nicely, and we also know that architects doing a great job having great buildings and the outside designed, but the vertiport not only is on the ground, it's also in the air, and that's why it's really the connection between airspace and the ground. What are the takeoff and landing procedures, and they are different. And this is one of the key distinguishing facts that we keep in mind. Again, I can only also recognize here the work that has been done by EASA with the obstacle-free volume and the approach that is taken, really a performance-based thing, making use of the better performance. And of course, we are more than happy to provide performance data. This is what we always ask, tell us the performance data, and then we can do something. But it's following the principle of form follows function, as in many domains. So you have to understand what is the aircraft capable to do, and from that we can design a vertiport that makes sense and actually takes benefit of the new performance. Of course, there are a lot of, in some regions more, in some regions less, heliports already exist. But what is the purpose of these heliports? It's mainly for hospitals, it is for offshore, it is not really designed for passenger transport, for convenience of passenger journey. So this is something also, maybe not so much related to aviation topics that we are discussing here. But again, coming from the customer perspective, we have to keep in mind, we have to design the vertiport as an infrastructure that actually should provide very convenient and high throughput passengers, and of course all the safety issues coming with it. Again, another topic, looking at the whole functions that actually also, and you are well aware of that, what's happening at the airport, the same has to fit in even the smallest vertiport. So if you look at a very small vertiport, and this is what our concept handbook is all about, the question was really, what is the smallest footprint a vertiport can have to accommodate all the functions that are needed? And that relates both to the aircraft turnaround, that relates to the passenger ground handling, that relates to maintenance aspects, that applies to all the people who have to be at the vertiport, and that is sometimes forgotten, and I think this is something very crucial also for you or anybody to design a vertiport, to keep that in mind, having all these functions available, or at least think about the concept, how it could fit into the network that exists already. Capacity, I mentioned that already. We also see, as was mentioned before, as we aim for vertiports in cities, that there's very different footprint available. So we really have to fit the vertiport into the given space that is there. And one thing, I think we talk about sustainability. We see clearly the future in electric mobility. That brings some challenges. Lithium-ion batteries were mentioned already as a dangerous good, but of course also for re-energizing and for firefighting topics. That is still an open issue, so we are working on that and can only invite you, and I'm happy to discuss it also later with you, some ideas to really progress that thing, because everybody is a bit standing by, waiting for others to start with the work, so we actually are in need of that, so we are really also developing something and happy to share that with you. Security was mentioned as well here. It's not a safety aspect, but I think everybody is aware. Bringing into this new mode of transport into cities creates a bit of a potential security issue, I would say. But again, something we have to be careful not to overdo. I think somehow it's aviation, but please also have in mind it's a kind of taxi operation. So nobody would ask you if you enter a taxi on the street, having a security check, or even if you go on a train, there can be quite some security issues. So we have to try to find the right balance here between something that is needed and something that is still convenient and makes sense for the business case. And last but not least, I think, again, we really appreciate also the SC-VTOL with EASA and the higher certification standards for the aircraft, but that brings a benefit that we should actually utilize. So we will have aircrafts here flying in Europe and around the world according to this certification baseline that are as safe as any Airbus, Boeing aircraft. So we should not always think, okay, we can only let these aircraft fly above uncongested areas. Why? Because even helicopters are allowed to fly over congested areas with limitations, we know that. So I think there is a benefit and we should make use of that. And yeah, maybe I'll stop here for the time being as time is short, but just giving a short insight what we would have in mind when it comes to smart vertiport design.
Thank you very much, Jorgen. When I listen to you and all the considerations you have said, I would find it quite difficult to design a vertiport. It's a lot of things to take into consideration. Smaller footprints, capacity, how to deal the security, the location, the safety. So it seems to be a difficult task. So you are doing really a very difficult job. You don't have a space and you need to consider everything, and you don't have a lot of standards. And this is a question, before we go to the slide, which I would like to make to all panelists. So each of you, please, to reply. So Joaquin has said, so we have now an action. We need to develop harmonized rules in Europe for vertiport. So now it's going to be rule, prototype technical specifications were guidelines. So the member states could take it to develop the vertiports. So Solène could take it to develop the vertiport in Pontoise, but could come up with a different thing. Actually, you developed even, you design it before the guidelines came, but you were participating in the work. So it's not mandatory. So the member states and the national aviation authorities and the operators are not obliged to use them. But now we have a task. We need to work on rules for for at least the high-level rules for the design, for the member states, for the certification, most likely. We need to be proportionate, obviously, for the type of risk we try to manage, although when I hear ferrovial, since we are in a very risky environment, congested areas. So, and we need to design those rules, technological agnostic, and we don't have many standards. So what are your suggestions to EASA and to the community on how we should go about to design those rules? Joaquin, from the European Commission?
I'm not going to give advice to EASA on how to design the rules. After all, that's why we created a technical agency in order to assist us.
But political direction. Give us a political direction.
No, rather practically, I think there's a great room and importance of industrial standardization. So, for instance, when you and I would like to take up what Jörn said. I mean, indeed, the future of all this must be electric, because otherwise, the decarbonization agenda that is actually driving the support of the development of UAM would not be catered for. But that obviously means that we will then have to have some sort of standardization on the charging means, because if we want to also follow up this idea of these being open access infrastructures, I mean, then everybody who comes there must be able to recharge his vehicle. And that, for instance, is a point where I would not expect, at least initially, to be an EASA rule, but rather industry should come forward with the appropriate standards in order to ensure that this will happen. And so I think there are many of these elements that we have been discussing which could be subject to industrial standardization. And then, of course, there are more directly safety and security-related features where clearly the agency will have to take the lead in designing the rules that ensure that the expectations of citizens in relation to having the same high level of safety standards as in civil aviation are being maintained.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. You have said the word of industry standards. Indeed, this is at the moment also an area where we don't have a standardization body, but where we need really to work together to come up to, and the industry need to come up to these industry standards, and more here we need them. So Solène, what would be your suggestion and basically your contribution to all this work?
Yeah, so on our side, so as you mentioned earlier, we started actually building in 2020 the experimental site in Pontoise. So before the prototype actually certification that you proposed actually. So We actually used the heliport guidelines, the heliport regulations, and after that we had to actually, and we could see it in the picture, we actually had to modify because we put obviously a H on the FATO and then the recommendations proposed by EASA with a V, so we have to modify that. So I guess the way we have to make it together is like use what we're doing and as a baseline and help on the research and investigation that has to be done. But I'm going to probably use my angle and my view is the fact that we are building right now vertiports in airports and in aerodromes. For us, obviously, there is an endpoint where you end up like in the city center. But for us, for 2024, we're building 4 vertiports in either very big airports or aerodromes in the city, in the region of Paris, with 1 in the city. And for us, one of the biggest challenges is the interface with the airport. It's like, where do you locate compared to the airport? What is the interface? Do you position it airside, landside? We are going towards like an angle where we position it airside so that we can use and capitalize on all the services that we have. So what is the interface that we have? There's 2 main aspects I think we have to bear in mind is like the passenger journey. We need to have multimodal platforms so that when a passenger is coming from an international flight, then he can very smoothly and sort of like fastly sort of use that vertiport and transfer towards like an eVTOL flight. So that interface is very sort of something important for us so that we can use the services that we have right now in airport. And I'm thinking, obviously, the ground handling. I'm thinking the firefighting team, which is very important, as we said, for the batteries. And many other services that we have like in and around the airports. So that interface. But the other part is also the aircraft safety. So there's a full passenger journey, but it's aircraft safety. It's like when you locate a FATO, then you need to integrate the flight path of the eVTOL among a very congested airspace. So you're in an aerodrome, thinking about, for example, Charles de Gaulle, and you have to find a flight path for that eVTOL. So for me, what would be really interesting is like having that approach also from EASA to the interface with the airport so that you have the best passenger journey. What we're trying to achieve here is to have a fast and sort of smooth passenger journey. So having that sort of into consideration, I'm thinking also security and all of these different aspects we talked about earlier. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Solène. So for the rest of the panels, 1 minute, because otherwise we won't have. No, but it was very good what you said. Actually, the integration with the traffic management, the airport environment is high on our agenda. Roman. Quickly, suggestions, development, things to consider.
I promise 1 minute. No, standardization is key, and you've done an amazing job at EASA, and we are also working with the French civil aviation on that. I wanted to mention, just to highlight that in our plan for vertiports in Paris, the most difficult is in the city of Paris, where we need more authorization, and it's a crucial, and the RATP group is working a lot on that, but it's very difficult, yeah.
To try and add to that, I think a continuation of the approach that's been taken to date, so collaboration, consultation with the industry, and from a regulatory perspective, don't be tempted to prescribe things too early. Do get that real-life operational data and then have the view to implement. Don't hamstring the industry before we actually know how it's going to perform.
Right. Yeah, I think nothing much to add from my side. I think the crawl, walk, run approach is a very valid one in various aspects, be it vertiport, be it airspace. So take what we have. I mean, from our side, we try to support as much as possible, be it in the rulemaking activities as far as we can, and also in EuroKE developing standards. I think this is in our own interests, and we just can ask everybody collaborating and contributing with the knowledge we have. And we also have test sites in Germany, and of course we'll also gather data so we can provide the data that are required.
Thank you very much, dear panelists. We go for the Slido. So to everybody, please take your chance now to put the Slido questions. The first question we have is to Solène. So how can existing FBOs prepare operationally and infrastructure-wise for eVTOLs?
So I'll try to be short as well. I think it can be very interesting as a short term. So we're aiming towards 2024 Olympic Games. We have to reuse our infrastructure. So reusing the existing FBO is definitely what I would consider a good idea. If you have some, depending on the airport, aerodrome, we've got many different configurations just within the Paris region. So in one airport we have FBO, and I think it's a right way to go, but it's not designed for like VTOL. You have like many different constraints. I'm thinking about charging the batteries. I mean, even when we have FBO, we have to have extra infrastructure for energy sort of provision. And also it's not sort of done specifically for eVTOL. So it's good as a starting point, short term, but then you need to design specifically for that. I'm thinking also for a very fast sort of journey process. We don't have the same sort of landing procedures, and that was mentioned earlier by Jorn, don't have the same landing procedures. What we're trying to achieve with the Vertiport is to have like the FATO and the parking zone as close as possible to the Vertiport. It's not what we have in the FBO. So yeah, I think short term, it's a really good idea, and you have to reuse existing infrastructure, but then you have to move away from reusing all of this infrastructure to have something more designed and sort of like adapted to eVTOL. To gain, what you're trying to gain is the time and also like to be able to have that passenger journey that is to the right standard.
Thank you very much, Solène, for the answer. We have a question from Ansgar. So sorry, before I was not looking into who put the question, my apologies. So from ACI. So when do the panelists, this is I think the question, the million question, they expect the first truly commercial operations of eVTOL's service to airports, and in which countries do they will take first? So commercial operations.
I mean,
who wants to address?
I can talk for
Solène.
I can talk for both of us, but yeah, definitely. I mean, that's the plan with working with Volocopter to have, like, for the Olympic Games, a commercial eVTOL service to airport, to and from airports to the city center of Paris. So the country is France, and then for the Olympic Games, and that deadline is not moving. So.
Exactly, so it's there, and I guess once you have invested and done all the work, I guess you won't stop there.
Exactly. Once all the work has been done, I think it allows us to accelerate everything. And that's why we're also working closely with the EASA and the DGAC. But that deadline is actually helping all of us to accelerate, because if we didn't have a deadline, it would take a lot of time, and we would all take time to make sure, but now we've got the accelerator, and I think it's very helpful for all of us to have that focus.
Maybe just a quick comment from my side. Definitely, I think Olympics 24 is the goal, I think, for many of us. So I think we have the joint effort to make it happen. But maybe on a more generic term, I would see definitely 2024. And I think it should be Europe, I think, for various reasons. So I think that is what I can add here.
Thank you very much, Jorn, for complementing. Next question is from Walter CA, Italian, I guess. CA. So what about Vertiports and Vertiroutes? So we have discussed, as Jorn has put my favorite subject, so how to link the Vertiports network and the route network design, considering these particularities of VTOLs. So what about day-night, all-weather operations, diversion Vertiports? Can you, I guess it's more Jorn who can, and maybe Brad also explain how this is all considered in the design?
Yes, what about it? So, I mean, definitely we are looking into it, and we are well aware there has to be a need to really connect the Vertiports to the airspace. Not sure in what direction exactly the question goes and what are the considerations, concern maybe connected to it. Happy to discuss that maybe also over the lunch break. So definitely we are looking into it. I think what we are doing right now is developing specific routes connecting the takeoff and landing sites, and let's call them Vertiport for the time being. And we have to see how it works. And there are certain topics related to existing rules. You're all aware of SERA, and do they need to have exemptions? Where can you fly? Can we use existing routes, helicopter routes, things like that? So yes, all this is ongoing. I think we are, from our perspective, are well aware of that and don't see any blockers here. Of course, it has to be discussed and agreed with the competent authorities. Day-night or weather operations, I think we will start again crawl, walk, run, with a very realistic approach being VFR in day operations, and not necessarily all-weather operations. It has several implications, both on the certification of the aircraft, also on the operations of the ground infrastructure. But this will develop rather quickly over time, that we can actually also fly during nights, a kind of IFR. I wouldn't call it IFR operations. And maybe just quickly, diversion vertiports. Yes, very interesting topics. I don't know to what level of detail you're aware of the concept of continuous safe flight and landing. So we will make sure that the aircraft, if something goes wrong, has the chance to divert to a vertiport and actually land safely. And this is also what we have to make sure to find these kind of alternate vertiports. In EASA terms, we still have to see what's the difference to helicopters existing using operating sites as this kind of situations. So yeah, we are well aware of that. We are addressing that and have confidence we can work on that and find solutions.
Thank you very much for the answer. I think the next one goes also to you from Anonymous, but I think you have answered already half of it, how you can fly VFR conditions only, so you have indicated. But how you forecast your approval? So 2024, we will be there? It's related, I guess, to the POA, DOA approvals, but in general, yeah, I would say the approval. You need all the approvals to...
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are well aware of that. I think that is also what made me joining Volocopter. I think we have a very good understanding what it takes in order to make it happen. I think there are some projects out there who are maybe underestimating the effort that is needed. Maybe small correction, we have also a POA already, so we are not only design organization approval, but also production organization approval, just to make that small note here. So yes, again, we aim for 2024. That means having also the necessary approvals, including an AOC. And yeah, how can you fly this machine in VFR condition only? Yeah, it will be VFR, so I'm not quite understanding the question, to be honest. But that is the starting point. We will start VFR and then quickly evolve into more automated and instrument and also IMC conditions.
Thank you very much, Jörg. The next question, I don't know who can answer, but I guess between Brad Pehasolen and Roman. Which security threat you see at the vertiport that we need to deal with? So obviously, Jörg was saying we need to be proportionate because when one take a taxi, we don't do super checks. And the same, I think they put, Michael from Schiphol Airport put like when you take an aviation from a grass strip or something, an aircraft, so you don't do a lot of security checks either, although you can fly over the cities. So what is it, the threat?
Yeah, I mean, we have the exact situation actually, and I think that's what is really interesting question, is that we're reusing some of our airfield. So, you know, you've got different level, obviously, of security depending on which aerodrome you have. Just in the region of Paris, you have many different level of security, and then we're planning also a vertiport in aerodrome that is much smaller with much less actually security, and we can't just reuse it like that. So, so we really need to think about the fact that we can't just consider it as any sort of like other type of aircraft, because there's not going to be the same level of attention that is being given to it. Also, it's going to go towards an urban area, and it's going to fly above, obviously, congested areas. So we have to adapt. We can't just actually reuse that, even though that could have been our first also approach.
Okay, the security risk.
Yes, I think we have to bear in mind that we are talking about an emerging industry here, which needs to demonstrate that it's capable of operating safely and securely. So clearly, the moment the first Volocopter crashes in a city, this industry will have a problem. And the same is true the minute the first pilot is forced to fly his Volocopter into the Berlaymont building in Brussels by a terrorist. So therefore, just saying, well, surely this is the same security risk as from flying from a grass strip, I'm not sure we should start with the word surely. I think this needs to be carefully analyzed, and we really need to make sure that we have all the ingredients in place to assure citizens that this industry will be safe and secure, because otherwise there is no license to grow, there is no license to exist, actually. And therefore, I think this is a key question where we have to step aside from just making assumptions and where real analysis is required in order to determine what exactly is the level and security that is needed and what measures do we need to take in order to arrive at that level.
Thank you very much, Joaquin. We have 30 seconds to conclude the panels. We still have very interesting questions in the Slido. My suggestion will be that with the EASA and with the panelists, we try to provide some answers to these questions and maybe send for those we know, send it to them. We could continue talking for hours, but the time is over. So we have a very interesting discussions. What I can conclude from the panel is more than ever, so we need to work together to develop those harmonized rules that they are proportionate to the risks we need to manage, but that they guarantee a high level of safety and standards across Europe, but also to try to set together with the international partners the way along the globe. So the urban air mobility and the success will depend on the societal acceptance. So we need to engage with the citizens more than ever. And the availability of the vertiports and the acceptance of the citizens to have those vertiports in their cities will be the key success of the industry. Convenience and safe operations of vertiports is the key priority, and the integrations in the airport environment is a must. So with all these conclusions, I would like that we give a big applause to Joaquin, Solène, Romain, Brad, and Jörg, and also to my shadow moderator, Pedrak. Please, big applause.
Thank you very much to all the panel. So we're going to break now for lunch, which will be on the first floor, as it was yesterday. As I said earlier, for anybody who missed it, we're going to start the next session again at 1 o'clock. So please be back here at 1 o'clock, and our aim is to then finish at 3. Thank you very much.